This video is brought to you by patrons like Dawn Houston. You can help support the channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com/DiceCheckYT for more behind the scenes content and exclusive patron only battle reports. That's patreon.com/DiceCheckYT or click on the link in the description.
Come on. Obviously you're a skater.
Hello everybody, welcome to DiceCheck. My name is Bricky, and today I'm going to be spending way too much time going way too in depth about things that I think are really cool. As a lot of you may have been aware, there are a lot of new Sisters of Battle units being shown. There was even some leaked data sheets for the Triumph of St. Catherine and the Exorcist, so it really seems like we're going to be getting a Sisters Codex sometime in the near future, either after the Admech Codex or perhaps after whatever comes after the Admech Codex. Might be Orcs, we haven't quite figured it out yet, but somewhere down the line, Sisters are looking next up on the block. And since they are both my favorite army and the army I have the most points for and the army that I have been playing extensively as of recently and the army that's like top 3 in the game, I wanted to do a couple things. Mainly go over the codex that we have right now and like kind of a slight, maybe not a review, but just kind of discuss the things in it, but mainly talk about the things I want to see in the upcoming codex, changes I would make to what we already have, and more so kind of do a little bit of a rundown, because a lot of people understand Sisters in terms of the meta and how powerful they are, but they are actually, outside of competitive, a surprisingly lesser played faction, and a lot of people don't really know what they do well. I always joke with my friends when I play it that I'm talking about Miracle Dice and Acts of Faith, and they're like, dude, you could be making this shit up and I just wouldn't even know. This is a combination of, hey, what do I want to see in the next codex? Talking a little bit about what's currently in this codex, and also just a little bit of a rundown to get you a little more informed. So with that, it's going to be a long video, so go ahead, pause the video, get a snack, get a drink, do something, settle down, get a blankie on, I don't give a shit, and let's go ahead and get started in here. So what makes the Sisters army good? Well, there's a couple base fundamental things when it comes down to this army. The first one is that they have very low base strength units. So when you take something like an Intercessor, right? Weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 3, strength toughness 4, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, and a 3-up save with a pretty damn good bolt gun, or bolt rifle, it's 20 points. A Sister of Battle, a standard one, is weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 3, toughness strength 3, only 1 wound, only 1 attack, and a regular bolt gun for 11 points. So the Intercessor, I would say, has way more than double the power of a normal Battle Sister for not double the points. However, what makes Sisters incredibly strong is the layering of buffs. All their base stuff is kind of weak, but then you add auras, you add special rules, you add miracle dice, you just add all of these extra things, and that's what makes them so strong. They also have a couple other major factors. Trading upwards is a big thing of them because they are so either squishy or generally have a lot of base mediocre output. The damage they do actually trades upwards over and over again. It makes it so that even these lower level Sisters can actually consistently do damage to much more expensive units. You can run them full melee, you can run them full shooting, but they also operate great in between. There's no specific way you're forced to run Sisters. You've got lots of flexibility in all the phases of the game, minus Psychic. And finally, one of the reasons I really like this army is skillful decision making. The thing that a lot of people, especially in the older codexes, always thought was that it was only about the list you build. Like all the skill in the game went towards the list building phase and the movement phase. And anything that can increase decision making, anything that forces you to be like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, what am I gaining, what am I losing, and adding different kinds of resources, i.e. Miracle Dice is a giant one, that decision making, how your units are spread out, the fact that they're so weak but can do so much damage, so you have to mitigate them and micromanage them pretty heavily. These are all the things that make the army, I think, a lot more fun than just a plug and play army, and require at least a little bit of thought and foresight in order to actually pilot well. So that's the old fundamentals of Sisters in a nutshell. This is why I like the army, this is the whole thing. So let's talk about the base rules for the army. So let's start with Acts of Faith. Now when I say Acts of Faith, a lot of you have no idea what I mean. That's Miracle Dice. Acts of Faith is Miracle Dice. It's just the term used for when you use it. I'm gonna do an Act of Faith, that's spending Miracle Dice. Basically, Miracle Dice are, you roll the dice, Whatever you get is put aside, and then you can substitute that for a roll later on. The rolls you can substitute them for are advances, hits, wounds, damage, deny the witch, saves, charges, we'll talk about that in a bit, and morale tests. Now you can only do this once per round, or sorry, per phase. However, you get them in different ways. Start the battle round, kill a unit once per phase, they only get max 1 per phase. Character dies, you get 1. Deny the witch, you get 1. Roll a 1 for morale test, you get 1. And then there's other things like the Triumph of St. Catherine. Acts of Faith, Miracle Dice are very powerful, but they're also flavorful and they're interactive. So overall, while they are very strong as a mechanic, I don't have a problem with them. I think they're pretty good. They offer decision making because it's an entire resource that you have at your disposal, and being able to only generally use 1 per phase makes it, okay, is this the right time? Should I wait a little bit? Do I even have the numbers or the dice to use it for? And also, of course, it is still a little bit of RNG because you have to roll the miracle dice. A lot of people determine it like taking the RNG out of an RNG game, when in reality, you're still rolling for the bastards. Overall, miracle dice in their own right, I think are the big 3. Flavorful, powerful, and fun. Those are the main 3 things that are important in kind of 40k in general. The only exception I have for this, I think, is the charge roll. So everything else, like even damage rolls, I think is fine because you have to roll really well to get those. But charge rolls feel a bit too powerful. Being able to take a giant squad of Repentia or Zephyrim out of strategic reserves or from a Rhino or something, and being able to just auto 9-inch charge them into something, you could argue, well, they should have had a screening unit, but even so, that's incredibly powerful to be able to do that, even if you can only do it once per phase. I think that that might be one of the main things of Acts of Faith that might be able to be changed and nerfed a bit. Honestly, we're going to talk a lot about some of the melee power of Sisters being the more overpowered stuff of the faction, but I think a lot of that is also going with the charge roll itself, the fact that you can miracle dice a charge roll. At the current moment, you can use it for both dice. I would not be opposed to forcing you to only be able to use it with 1 dice. I think that if you're able to take that down a little bit, remove the guaranteed power of it, and also remove from getting those super long charges unless you roll well, things like 11s and stuff, or 11-inch charges, I think that can really tone down the melee power of the actual army. I would like the ability to still have that, like that power for double up on the miracle dice, but you have to pay for it. 1 CP allows you to use 2 miracle dice for your charge act of faith, or perhaps bake that into some of the reroll charge abilities that some of the units have. Repentia Superior are kind of weak right now. They let you reroll charge rolls for Repentia, but why would you do that when instead you really should just be charging them with miracle dice? Well, now you can do it where it gives you reroll charges, or you can use 2 miracle dice for your act of faith for your Repentia. So if you're taking that tax, you get rewarded for it. Overall, miracle dice I think are totally fine. The charge rolls, little bit worrisome. A little strong, makes those really squishy melee units, well, safe. Next up, we have the Shield of Faith. This is a 2-parter. All of your Sisters units gets a 6-up invul save. Think of it like Admech Bionics. They also can deny the witch on 1 dice. The 6-up invul, totally fine. Normal, works out well with the miracle dice because maybe you have a 6, a little clutch thing, flavorful, totally cool. The deny the witch is honestly terrible. We did the math on this, and because you can only deny the witch on 1 dice, that means that your opponent has to have a psychic power that is warp charge 5. If they roll it, they have to roll the 5. They can't roll anything higher. They have to roll a 5, and then you have to roll a 6 to deny it. That is 0.46% chance to deny anything with this ability. For a hardcore anti-psyker army, denying on 1 dice is just, it'll never happen. It's literally half than a % chance. This should be buffed. If it is buffed, they need to therefore nerf the 1 CP 4-up deny. Because that little 1 CP on a 4-up deny of psychic power is really strong, and I think makes up for the fact that this ability is just really shitty. Personally, I think that you should either allow them to deny the witch normally, or this might be a little bit annoying for admin, but they can all deny the witch once per game, fail or succeed, or something like a conclave ability, kind of like the Imperial Guard Psychic Conclave, where maybe 3 sister units are all together, only one of them denies and the other 2 forego it, and they can add +1 per unit. So, deny the witch, these 3 squads say no, but we're going to add to it, you get +3 to your deny the witch roll. something like that. Personally, I kind of like a 1 CP strat where it's, hey, after rolling a Deny the Witch test, you can then spend miracle dice to add to the number like up to 3. So if you need to get a 9 and you roll a 7, you can discard 2 miracle dice and therefore deny it with the 9. Because then you're at least dipping into your resources and you can't just auto deny it with a 4. Next up, let's talk about Sacred Rites. These are the special abilities you get for running only sisters in your army and not souping in any way. There are 6 options here. They are +1 to advance and charge, 5 up shoot or melee on death, +3 to the Deny the Witch tests, wound rolls of 6 in shooting add AP -1, exploding 6s in melee, and reroll morale tests. As far as this goes, +1 to advance and charge, fine. It's very strong, it's good, it's useful, no problems. 5 up shoot back. This is a weird one. I like it because it's fun, but it's rather gimmicky and requires a lot of rolling. Making it a 4-up shoot back would be way too powerful, but I don't know of any other real way to make this any stronger without making it feel bullshit. So as far as I'm concerned, I think it's fine, mainly because the more melee like glass cannon armies, Drukhari for instance, that arrive, it'll become better. Because, you know, regular Bolt Sister dies and shoots on death against Custodians or Death Guard, who gives a shit? Fire that against Witches? It's a little bit better. Add 3 to Deny the Witch tests. Personally, I don't mind it existing. It allows you to, adding 3 to Deny the Witch makes your 1 dice roll a hell of a lot better, but I think it should be, well, better. If they're gonna go ahead and make it so, let's say, instead of 1 dice, you can Deny the Witch normally with your sisters, then this should be allowing you to re-roll it. If not that, and they keep the regular Shield of Faith, then perhaps this one should make it so that you deny normally instead of just 1 dice. Wound rolls of 6 in shooting add +1 AP. That's fine. With Meltas, you're already -4, so who gives a shit? This is good for bolters and flamers, and this is good for a more gunline army. It's really not that good, but I think if you get more into the bolters and stuff and all that kind of extra bits, then it'll get better. Exploding 6s in melee is by far the best. The passion is extremely strong. I think this is less of a problem with how good this Sacred Rite is and more of a problem with the melee in the army in its own right. For instance, Repentia hit on 4s, but they reroll everything. Which means, like, if they hit on 2s, rerolling nothing, they would get fewer exploding 6s. That's the problem, is that they have all these things for rerolls to give them insane amounts of exploding 6s and just take them to the next level. I don't have a problem with this one in theory. If it was capped, maybe 5 per unit or something, I wouldn't mind that, or 1 per model, so to speak. But even so, right now, I think the melee needs to come down a bit, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Finally, reroll morale tests. This is just trash. Sisters don't give a shit about morale 90% of the time because they're just so goddamn faithful. And honestly, rerolling morale for this one especially just would be fishing for 1s for miracle dice, which almost never happens anyway. I would like this to go as more of a, hey, you auto pass on 1s and 6s, kind of like that one Tau thing, I forget what it's called, and you gain a miracle dice if you roll either. Like, bonding knife, to make you just yell bonding knife. Bonding knife ritual, that's what it's called. If you're rerolling morale tests, and it allows you to, let's say, auto pass 1s on 6s and gain a miracle dice for either, that might seem strong, but you're passing that up. Like, you're taking this over exploding 6s in melee, or +1 to advance and charge. It needs to be on the same level. With all of the base stuff done, let's move into Order Convictions now. Let's start off with Order of Our Martyred Lady. This one gives you a miracle dice when a unit dies per phase, in addition to the character, as well as +1 to hit when that has lost models. Some people don't like this because they feel like they go against each other. More things die equals more miracle dice. Bigger squads means better plus to hit. I personally don't think so. I think this mainly rewards you for taking big squads, because if your opponent can't kill 1 unit per phase, you're good. Entire Order Conviction I think is pretty good, and I would change very little of it. The Warlord trait is +1 wound and +1 save to a maximum of 2 up. I don't really like that. It's not very Martyred Lady. The whole point of Martyred Lady, fluff-wise, is, you know, martyrdom, redemption, that kind of thing. I would much rather prefer the Warlord trait to be something more on the lines of +1 attack and a fight on death. The Relic is a Strength 9 12-inch Inferno pistol. You have to pay for an Inferno pistol instead of like a Strength 8 6-inch Inferno pistol. It's really not that special. If anything, give it 2 shots because this is just mediocre. And the strat is 1 CP. If a character dies, you get army-wide reroll 1s to hit what killed it for the rest of the game. That sounds good on paper. The problem is that you have a lot of access to reroll 1s anyway, and you need a character to die. So they already have to be in your lines. A character has to be dead, so it's already like battle round 2 or 3. And at that point, reroll 1s to hit, like you already got that to begin with. If anything, this should be more like +1 to hit, or maybe reroll 1s to wound, or something a little bit better, because it only works if your people die. I do like the Martyrdom idea though, you know, slaying dies, you get benefits for it. It works well with the Order Conviction, but the strat feels just unnecessary. You get access to Junith Yeruta, who is incredibly powerful. I have very little bad to say about Our Marred Lady. With the exception of some of those things, I think they should stay the way it is. Next is Valorous Heart. This is the super insanely tanky one. You get a 6-up, feel no pain for all your units, and everything ignores -1 AP and ignores -2 AP if you're near the Imagifier. The Warlord trait is a 5-up, feel no pain. The Relic is a -1 toughness while in engagement range, and the strat is 1 CP to ignore all to hit modifiers. It's kind of cool that Valorous Heart is an order that takes an army that's pretty squishy, and you know how most kinds of traits in other armies make them slightly more tanky? This one makes them laughably more tanky. They become legitimately tanky. Ignoring -2 is kind of ridiculous at times, and it makes them just a nightmare to remove. I'm glad for that because it's flavorful. You know, the Valorous Heart is all about stoicism and holding their ground. The Warlord trait is a 5-up, feel no pain. That seems kind of redundant. You know, you already have a 6-up, feel no pain, you're just buffing it by 1. Doesn't seem like there's really a need for it. Personally, I would enjoy an additional wound, or actually, I would take that Our Marred Lady trait. +1 wound and +1 save. That's a lot more like a standard Valorous Heart kind of deal. So I would just kind of swap them maybe. The Relic feels underwhelming, even though it probably isn't. The thing is having -1 toughness in engagement range after fighting enough Death Guard, you realize is quite good. But the problem is that this is a non-melee order, and this is a melee relic. So if anything, I would maybe make it like some kind of change. I'm not quite sure how I would change it up. Perhaps make it like maybe a 3-inch aura so you can at least use it for shooting a little bit. But overall, I don't have a problem with it, but it just feels like I don't really know how to change it. Next up is Edmond Chalice, my personal favorite. And they get 2 options. One is 5-up, feel no pain against all mortal wounds. And also you can discard 1 miracle dice to turn the other one into a 6. I love this trait a ton. I think it's a lot of fun. I love that the feel no pain is against all mortal wounds. So it assists with things like Catan for Necrons, or lots of the crazy like 6s that cause mortals from Drukhari. It's like a lot more useful across the board. And the miracle dice thing is so much fun because I'll keep mentioning over and over again, I love decision making. I love the ability to have more skill and more thought. And this gives you more decision making. Do I want to get rid of more miracle dice to make these ones really powerful, or am I getting rid of too much? You know, do I have to get rid of certain things to make this like exactly what I need? I love the choices. The Warlord trait is fucking great. Your first miracle dice of the game is a free 6, and you gain D3 command points. Take it every time you're taking Edmond Chalice. The Relic, not very good. Strength 5, -2, D3 damage, 1-shot bolt gun that can target characters. Does 3 damage against Psychers, but it's rapid fire 1. I mean, cool, you have like a little sniping anti-psyker bolter, but really 1 shot isn't enough. Maybe make that thing 2 shots or rapid fire 2. Overall, it's just kind of mediocre. It's underwhelming. The Stratagem, I like and don't like. It's 2 CP to max out the flamers in all the flamers in the unit. That's fine on full squad retributors with heavy flamers and cherubs. Anything that isn't that, it's too expensive. Honestly, I would either make it 1 CP, turn all flamers into D3 +3, or make it like, okay, 2 CP on retributors, 1 CP on everything else. Because I'm not gonna spend 2 CP to max out like 2 D6 flamers on an immolator. That's just too pricey. That's just silly. Edmond Chalice is fucking great though. I love this order. Let's talk Bloody Rose. Bloody Rose is the problem child here. You gain +1 attack in the first round of combat, and +1 AP to all melee and pistol weapons. The Warlord trait is a +1 to attack, and it also allows you to advance and charge. The Relic is a 2 damage, AP -2 chain sword with +3 attacks, and the Stratagem is +1 to wound in melee. Bloody Rose is overpowered. This is flat out the case. Bloody Rose is too strong. Every goddamn list I see in every goddamn tournament is Bloody Rose with like 27 Repentia and Zephyrim. And if it's not that, then it's Valorous Heart or Our Marred Lady with a patrol attachment of Bloody Rose with a shitload of Repentia and Zephyrim. It is like completely too strong, and it actually pigeonholes other units. So let me talk about the Relic and the Strat real quick. The Relic is god tier, but I'm okay with keeping it that way because a souped up Canoness to becoming like a melee god is fine. You know, you can turn your Canoness into like a smash Canoness. It's nice, you know, Space Marines can do that. They can soup it up. You can make a Succubus in Drukhari with this special relic like the Triptych Whip. The Warlord trait is actually not that great. +1 attack and advance and charge sounds good, but there's another one called Righteous Rage, which is reroll all wounds in melee. You're gonna take that one, especially if you're taking that special relic. Bloody Rose in their own right needs a nerf. What I think is the best course of action is to take away their +1 attack. Just remove it. Instead, that +1 attack should go into the profiles of Repentia and Zephyrim units, and then maybe give them a points nerf. Repentia and Zephyrim units are just not good in non-Bloody Rose. They're forced to be in Bloody Rose. Because Repentia and Zephyrim, they only have 2 attacks. Just 2. And then they lose out on their AP. They lose out on their +1 to wound stratagem. Like, it's not worth it to take them in anything else. Taking them in Armar Lay doesn't feel worth it. Valorous doesn't feel worth it. Edmond Chalice doesn't feel worth it. It doesn't feel good to only have about 18 attacks on a full squad of 9. And really, you know, with invul saves and everything, like, you're going from 18 attacks to, with Bloody Rose and a missionary, to 36 attacks with +1 to wound and extra AP. Honestly, the problem isn't necessarily with Repentia or Zephyrim or any of these melee units. The problem is with Bloody Rose and maybe those charge roll miracle dice. Bloody Rose needs to take a huge backseat. It needs to still be your dedicated melee order, but be dedicated in other ways. That +1 attack is too strong. Give that attack baked into Repentia and Zephyrim and stuff, but then nerf them a little bit. Either increase their points cost or something of that nature. Because I want to be able to run these units in non-Bloody Rose. I mean, they'll still be a little bit less powerful, but I'm looking at, let's say, Drukhari, and I'm looking at witches and cults and covens, and everything in there is really powerful. And they can become more powerful in certain cults, covens, and cabals, but it's not like they're unusable in other factions. I feel like Repentia and Zephyrim and stuff are basically unusable in other orders, and that kind of sucks. Bloody Rose absolutely needs a rework or some kind of nerf, but not just nerfing it. You know, it's more like a power restructure, kind of like AdMech and their Cataphrons and Data Horde craziness. You know, a little too powerful here, spread it around a little bit. Next up, we have Argent Shroud. I'd probably argue this is the weakest of all the orders. Their order trait, though, pretty good. Advance and shoot all weapons as if you didn't advance. Not even turn them into assault, as if you just didn't advance. The problem? Everything else sucks. The Warlord trait is a 6-inch heroic intervention and fight first. But not like, choose an enemy to fight last. Fight first, so they can still hit you first if they're charging. The Relic is -1 to hit. -1 to hit, or 2-up armor save, permanent transhuman together. Like, not even a question. The Stratagem, a 5-up feel no pain for 1 unit during the enemy psychic phase. I do not like this order at all. Argent Shroud is supposed to be the really hardcore, get in the fight, like Alpha Strike order. That's the whole point of their lore and their fluff. With this, I think that the actual order conviction in its own right is fine, but could use a little extra nice to have. I think something like the Sautech ability with rapid fire weapons, like treat rapid fire range for all rapid fire weapons as 18 inches instead of the normal amount. Kind of like Sautech, I think would be kind of useful. It makes their bolters get in range a lot easier. If not that, maybe, I don't know, maybe like a slight movement bonus or something like 1 inch. I'm not quite sure, like 1 inch is added to all units. They're supposed to be fast, that's the whole point. The Warlord trait, it's not terrible. The 6-inch heroic intervention's not bad. The problem is this isn't Bloody Rose, so the actual hitting might not be that good. However, instead of fight first, do the choose enemy to fight last. That's far more important in this day and age. As for the Relic, it's super underwhelming. -1 to hit is just far weaker compared to Iron Surplus. And honestly, if anything, make it stronger, like -1 to hit, -1 to wound. Like, if you're gonna become fast and tanky and stuff, do something that isn't just -1 to hit. As for the Stratagem, I hate this. They have this for like Dreadnoughts, I think, which is 5-up from the opinion in the Psychic phase. I hate this Stratagem. If anything, I really think that it should have some kind of Alpha Strike for the Stratagem. I will take almost anything else. Perhaps allowing you to max out rapid fire weapons for certain ones of your abilities. Perhaps maybe auto advance 6 inches. Be kind of nice so you can guarantee that you're getting on this objective and you're moving really quick. Just something. The Stratagem should involve speed. What the speed is, I have no idea, but it should make you be schmovin'. This is all about fast and hit fast, hit hard. And right now this order, besides the conviction itself, isn't really like that. Lastly, we have Sacred Rose. Sacred Rose I actually like, but they're definitely weaker. This is the Miracle Dice order. This is when you want to go hard into Miracle Dice. So you get 5-up Overwatch, you auto pass combat attrition, and whenever you use a Miracle Dice, on a 5-up, you gain an extra one. Now, you're most definitely gonna lose the 5-up Overwatch. Iron Hands lost it, we're gonna lose it. I don't mind, it's kind of silly. I'm fine with it being gone. The auto pass combat attrition is nice. It means you can only lose one model every time they flee, which is fine, but sisters don't really care about any kind of leadership problems to begin with, so it's really not that big of a deal. Honestly, I keep it as it is, but you know it'd be kind of cool? Maybe if they did that thing like Necrons do, where the command protocols go with certain dynasties, you can make it so that if you have that Sacred Right that lets you re-roll morale tests and you're playing Sacred Rose, you get like Fearless or something. The Miracle Dice thing is weird. 5-up Miracle Dice regeneration, after using it, is kind of bad. It barely happens at all. However, making it on a 4-up sounds way too powerful. If anything, I would keep the 5-up and maybe let you get a Miracle Dice every turn instead of every battle round, just to give you a little bit extra dice. Because at the end of the day, that's only about 5 more dice per game. And this is supposed to be the Miracle Dice, like, faction. You're supposed to be going hard into Miracle Dice for this one. And right now, it feels just kind of gimmicky. The Warlord trait is auto gain a Miracle Dice whenever the bearer of this Warlord trait uses an Act of Faith, which sounds good until you remember that you can only use 1 Act of Faith per phase. So this has to be the one you use every time. It should be auto gain 1 and lets you use an additional 1 in the phase, kind of like the Triumph lets you do. The Relic is a Brazier of Holy Fire, which is a once per game D3 mortal wounds firing thing. However, this Relic is the Brazier of Eternal Flame, which means instead of once per game, you can use it the entire game, but you have to discard a Miracle Dice every time you use it. I love this relic. It's my favorite relic in the entire army. Keep it this way. It's totally fine. You can only use it once per shooting phase or Overwatch anyway. The Stratagem is exploding 6s with bolt weapons. Fine, it's okay. It's only really good on like a full squad of Dominions with Storm Bolters, but overall, like exploding 6s with bolt weapons, it's a little bit meh. If anything, I would make it so that you can actually have max rapid fire range. So if you have a whole thing of bolt weapons and you get exploding 6s, you also get full rapid fire at full range, kind of like the Marines, how they have their bolter discipline. Just, you know, makes it a little bit easier if you're far away from them. I like Sacred Rose. I think they're pretty fun. I think they're flavorful and very fluffy, but they just need a little bit more into that Miracle Dice thing, and they need to kind of buff themselves up with that a tad bit more to make them truly worth it. With order convictions all done and done, let's talk Warlord traits. The Warlord traits we currently have are: add 1 to the leadership characteristic in a 6-inch aura, reroll all wounds in the first round of combat, subtract 1 from leadership of enemies in a 6-inch aura, gain a Miracle Dice at the start of a turn, +1 to your Shield of Faith invul, and can deny an additional psychic power with a -1 to enemy psychic tests within 12 inches. Reroll all wounds in the first round of combat, that's fine. It's hardcore, use it to murder people with a canoness, totally fine. Gain 1 Miracle Dice at the start of your turn, great. Celestine has this 1, extra Miracle Dice, no problems. +1 to the invul save in a 6-inch aura, pretty good. Slap that on a Magifier, give it the Book of St. Lucius, makes it pretty good. Allows you to really buff up that invul save, especially for the jump pack units with Angelic Visage. Add 1 to the leadership characteristic is terrible. If anything, I would perhaps make the allies fearless or ignore any kind of leadership modifiers, because honestly, just adding +1 to leadership is just straight terrible. Subtract 1 from the leadership of enemies within 6 inches, also terrible. Either this should be a much higher minus, or you should add an additional minus to combat attrition tests. So they'll run away 1s and 2s, or even 1s, 2s, and 3s when they're beneath a half squad. Also, 6 inches, not enough. Should be bigger, maybe like 12. And finally, the 6th can deny an additional psychic power and a -1 to psychic tests. Pretty bad. It's only 12-inch range, so the -1 is barely important. Should be like 24 or 18 inches, you know, smite or deny range. Also, reroll your... or can deny an additional psychic power. We've already talked about this. It's on 1 dice. It's barely gonna come up, 0.46% chance of happening. Honestly, ignore the whole additional deny. Just make it all psychic detriments, okay? Minus to the tests, maybe make them perils on doubles or perils if they fail. I know Tyranids have an ability or a stratagem where if the opponent fails the psychic test, they perils, which is pretty nasty. And that makes a lot of sense because Sisters are hardcore anti-psyker and Tyranids are really heavy psychic as well. So, you know, having them in a kind of a similar vein I think is perfectly fine. Relics. We have a Blessed Blade with flat 3 damage, plus 3 inches to the aura range, a special brazier that's instead replaced with a -2 to psychic tests, 2-up save and transhuman, reroll a miracle dice per turn, 3-up invul for Arcanines, 5-up feel no pain naturally, or a 4-shot strength 5 -2 2-damage bolt pistol. 3 inches of the aura range, Book of St. Lucius, totally fine. Extra auras are great. The 2-up armor save and permanent transhuman would be bullshit overpowered on anything that wasn't sisters. Luckily, we're like T3 and super weak, so it's fine. Reroll 1 miracle dice per turn. Pretty great. Litanies of Faith, pretty nice. Helps you with your miracle dice, you have to pay for the relic. Helps out. The Wrath of the Emperor. A 4-shot, 18-inch range, 2-damage bolt pistol with strength 5 -2. It's pretty great. I love that thing. It should be taken more often. Blessed Blade with flat 3 damage. Yeah, you still have to pay for the Blessed Blade, and it's D3 instead of flat 3, so it's not the hugest difference. If anything, it should get an extra attack or 2 to go along with the weapon profile, kind of like the Beneficence. This other one replaces the Brazier, which means you lose out on mortal wounds, and all it does is give you -2 to the enemy psychic tests. It's super specific. Honestly, I hate losing out on the Brazier of Holy Fire, but if you're gonna make this thing be like a super anti-psychic, -2 to cast and all this kind of stuff, do the thing I mentioned earlier, perils on doubles, on a fail, anything like that. 3-up invul for a Canoness is really good, but it's boring. I don't like 3-up invuls in general, except for like, you know, custodians, but that's a little different. And they're slowly being removed in their own right. I wouldn't mind that just being scrapped and giving like a Victor of the Blood Games type deal for a Canoness. The whole like reroll 1 hit wound and save per turn. When it's on a custodian, it's insane. When it's on a Canoness, you know, it's nice, but that 3-up invul could probably go. 6-inch aura of a 6-up feel no pain, only allowed on the Hospitaller. You know, because the Hospitaller, unlike a Space Marine medic, doesn't give off a feel no pain aura. But the difference is that, of course, the Space Marine Apothecary can revive like a 40-point Terminator. The Hospitaller can only revive like an 11-point Sister or so. Honestly, I think because she's barely taken in general, and she's kind of attacks, a little thing to make her a little bit better would be kind of nice, so people would take her more often. Okay, let's do stratagems. There's a lot of these here. I'm gonna rapid fire through the ones that I think are okay. 1 CP for the extra relic warlord trait, totally fine. 1 CP for your magic fire to get 2 buffs, totally fine. 1 CP to reroll your sacred right without getting duplicates, that's totally fine. It's good to help you if you take 2 of them. 1 CP to use a miracle dice and gain a miracle dice, totally fine, sometimes you need it. 2 CP for fallback to shoot and charge. I would change this a little bit. I'd make it like the Drukhari one, because Drukhari is like the greatest codex ever made. Instead of 2 CP to fall back and charge and shoot, 1 CP to fall back and shoot, 1 CP to fall back and charge, or 2 CP for both. Decisions, choices, we love them. Oh boy. Deadly Descent. 1 CP for shooting Seraphim weapons in the movement phase with 6-inch range. I have no idea how to change this without nerfing it into the ground. 2 CP seems too pricey, but removing it just seems wrong. Honestly, my issue with this isn't the fact that they can double shoot their flamers, it isn't the fact that they can shoot their Inferno pistols a lot. My problem is the fact that they can do that janky shit where they drop and they can deploy scramblers and still shoot. That's the part that feels too good. Just don't let them do that scrambler shenanigans, it's annoying. Next up, I hate this stratagem. The Dialogus can spend 1 CP to pick a chaos unit within 6 inches and deal 1 mortal wound. D3 if it's a demon. I hate this stratagem so fucking much, because no one takes a Dialogus, because it's terrible. We'll talk about her later. If you're gonna just do 1 mortal wound with only 6 inches, it should be on anybody. And maybe D3 to Chaos. Personally, I would just remove this stratagem in its own right, make it 12-inch range, and just bake it into the Dialogus' profile to begin with. 1 CP, on a 4-up, you deny a psychic power. We talked about this. Because the Deny the Witches ability on the Sisters Shield of Faith is so bad, I'm fine with this being here. If they buff that Deny the Witch ability, this thing needs to be nerfed. Next one is 1 CP. If you deny a power or roll a 1 for a morale test, you gain an additional D3 miracle dice. I love it, it's great. You barely deny anyway, and 1s for morale is rare, so cool. 2 CP. The hit roll miracle dice you use can also be used for the wound roll. 2 CP for that feels really, really pricey, because you're already losing the miracle dice. It's just allowing you to use just the additional 1 for the time frame. It feels just a little bit too pricey, but 1 CP feels a little bit too cheap. I would actually do it so that if you actually use, like, say, a 6 to hit, and then you want to use another one for the wound, you spend 1 CP and discard a miracle dice. Make you lose some of your like resources, decision making, make you lose some stuff. You have to spend something to be able to actually do it. 1 CP, discard up to 3 miracle dice and add that to a hit, wound, or saving throw to add the number of dice discarded. That's called Moment of Grace. It's a great stratagem. I love it. I'd keep it, no problems. You're using your resources. It requires decision making, totally fine. 1 CP, reroll all wounds in shooting or fighting against psychers. This is a weird one. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily mind making it 2 CP, but if it is, I would maybe ask to have the hits rerolled as well. It's one of those weird ones where it's like, Vengeance for Cadia for Guard is 1 CP to reroll all hits and wounds against Chaos in its entirety. That feels overpowered. This one is rerolling all wounds against Psychers for 1 CP. So kind of it feels bad, man, but at the same time, like, sisters are supposed to hate Psychers. It's like their shtick. So, I'm not smart enough to think of something better. 1 CP, the Exorcist tank, everything within 12 inches has -1 leadership. So bad. Why are they close enough to your tank? Why does the leadership matter? Why is this a good idea? I would much rather prefer something like the Grav Pulse of the Exorcist or something like Tremor Shells, where whatever you shoot at has like the -to hit or the -to movement, whatever, or some kind of reducing the charges of enemies. Like, okay, if they charge your Exorcist, they have now -2 to charge, similar to the Grav Wave Pulse of the different kinds of Marine stuff. 2 CP, your Celestian squad rerolls all hits and wounds. It's fine. If it was on Retributors, it would be bullshit, but Celestians are mostly just bolt guns and like 1 special and 1 heavy weapon. 2 CP, Star of Retribution, plus 12 inches to your multi-meltas and +1 damage, or +1 to hit for your heavy bolters, or reroll all heavy flamer wounds. This is the most bullshit stratagem I can think of almost in the game. I hate this stratagem. It feels so overpowered. The whole point of Eradicators, right? Even though they got a nerf, Eradicators were really strong for a while because they can come out of strategic reserves and fire their meltas and do a pretty good job with it. The thing is that with 24-inch meltas, you can somewhat, it's a little hard, but you can screen that. What this does is take units that are cheaper than Eradicators, do more damage than Eradicators, have access to miracle dice, and now you make them unscreenable. 36 inches is gigantic, and you give them extra damage. It is incredibly bullshit. I was thinking of all these different kinds of ways to change it up. Make it only 1 CP. Multi-meltas become Assault 2. Heavy bolters get +1 to wound instead. Like, all this speculation, and honestly, I would just get rid of the stratagem. I get it. Sisters are supposed to have really good meltas. The problem is meltas are really insanely good just in general right now. And sisters, with this stratagem, take it to a new level that just feels stupid. Next up, 1 CP. When a Repentia model is killed in melee on a 4-up, they do a mortal wound. That's whatever, you know. They die like paper anyway. Next one, 1 CP to advance and charge. I would do the same thing as the fallback one. 1 CP to advance and charge, or 1 CP to advance and shoot, or 2 CP for both. 1 CP, when firing at the same unit with a bolter, flamer, and melta, add 1 to the wound roll. The Holy Trinity. Someone actually mentioned to me that they think that this ability should be baked into the sisters, like as an army-wide rule. My mind tells me that's bullshit when it comes to the Retributors, because then you can stick a combi melta or a combi flamer, and all of your meltas now have +1 to wound, which feel a little bit crazy. But I kind of like the concept, because this is a very fluffy, a very sisters thing, and then you have to pay the costs for the flamer, for the melta, for the bolter, and because you have a flamer, you have to be within 12 inches to even get this thing to work, because they all have to fire at the same target. I like the idea of it being an army-wide ability, but you would need to like make some exclusions. Like, okay, it can work on anything that isn't Retributors, because that would be too strong. But if you're paying the extra points for a melta, a flamer, and the bolters on a casual Celestian or Battle Sister, that's kind of a cool idea. It's very fluffy. 1 CP, all Storm Bolters gain -2 AP and 2 damage. This is pretty good. Blessed Bolts is pretty good. The problem is that Storm Bolters can only be taken in mass on Dominions, and therefore it's only worth it on Dominions. If anything, I would give the thing I mentioned earlier, allow them to have max shots at any range. You know, 4 shots at any range instead of being within the rapid fire. Next up, 1 CP. Reroll any or all dice when determining firing the Exorcist's rockets. My only issue with this is that you have to do it like pre-roll. So if you roll well, then you spent 1 CP for nothing. I'd like it as more of a post-roll. It's basically just a better version of your CP reroll. And, you know, just like you roll your dice and you're like, ooh, I rolled really bad, I'm gonna do this, and you don't have to use your CP reroll. Or maybe allow 1 CP to allow you to use miracle dice to determine your shots. Because normally you can't use miracle dice to determine like D6 weapons or anything, D6 shot weapons. That'd be kind of cool. You can like 1 CP, you can use miracle dice for it. 1 CP, reroll 1s to wound within 6 inches of a Zephyrim unit. No problems with that, you know. They already reroll all wounds, so it doesn't make them any better. It just makes like some normal characters a little bit better. 2 CP, max out your Arco-Flagellant attacks, and then after they're done fighting, on a 6, they die. It's fun, and it's flavorful, it's fluffy, it's good. You can get 81 attacks out of those bastards. That's all right. 3 CP to fight again with Repentia, Penitent Engines, or Mortifiers. 3 CP strats I see are kind of being removed as of lately. I'm okay with that. This is too strong to make it 2 CP. If anything, I would make it so it's 2 CP on anything that's like not those 3 units. On maybe like, you know, if Celestine needs to fight again, you could do 2 CP for it because it's nowhere near as powerful as a full squad of Repentia. 1 CP, Hospitaller unit, do not add dead models in unit to morale test. That's fine. Like, it's basically an Aura of Fearlessness. You pay for it, you have to take a Hospitaller. It's fine. 2 CP, revive a dead character at the end of a phase and discard up to 3 miracle dice to give them back that many wounds. That's good. It's an auto revive of a character, which is pretty strong. It's 2 CP, so it's pricey, and it costs you miracle dice to keep their life up. Honestly, fine with that. 1 CP, auto explode an Immolator. Maybe make the Immolator flat 3 mortals instead of just D3. Kind of like the Burn-A-Bomb. Honestly, that'd be kind of nice because the Immolator is supposed to be a flamethrower tank, so either way. But honestly, it's fine. Last one. 1 CP is gain D3 CP when the Warlord dies. This should cost 0. I don't like how I have to like save a CP just so when my Warlord dies, I might get more CP, and then I roll a 1 and it didn't even matter. So that one should cost 0 CP if you're gonna do like the Martyrdom thing. Honestly, I'm fine with them reducing the amount of stratagems you feel like you have to use. After playing a lot of Necrons, I really feel the feeling of like, hey, I don't have must-use stratagems every single battle round. I feel like I can be a lot more picky and choosy, and they aren't a whole bunch of like really strong ones. This one here feels like there are a little bit too many strong ones, and therefore make it so I don't have to spend them every single time. Would be nicer. I'd have more CP and it involves more decision making. We like decision making. Okay, units. I'm mainly going to talk about the units that I think need changes. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm just going to, well, I'll blow through them really quick. The Canoness is fine as it is. The Missionary could maybe lose 5 points, a little pricey. The Triumph of St. Catherine, extremely good. I'm a little biased because it's awesome and it's very cheap, but it's not very damage dealy. It's just very tanky and it has a lot of great buffs. I love the Triumph. If anything, maybe raise it 5 points, make it 200 instead of 195. I really like it. Also change its auto Warlord trait because it kind of sucks. Junith, she's fine as she is. Maybe change her auto Warlord traits. Other than that, I would like her to have the normal Canoness keyword for Celestians because that feels like an oversight, but she's already really good, so it's fine. Keep her as she is. The Palatine. She costs the same as a Canoness, but she's got fewer wounds and fewer attacks. But she does have better weapons and she does reroll wounds, so maybe keep her. I don't really mind. I think she's fine as she is, probably. Celestine. I actually think Celestine needs to be buffed. It's a crazy thought, but she just feels too expensive. You know, she can auto-revive, but not really, on a 2-up, which means if you roll that 1, like holy shit. She gets that +1 invul save, which is neat, but she doesn't do enough damage. She has 6 attacks hitting on 2s, so you're only getting 5. Strength 7, -3, 2 damage. You're fighting Space Marines, you're wounding on 3s, so you only sink maybe 3, maybe 4, give or take. They might save 1. You're only killing maybe 3 Marines with a 170-point unit. The Triumph is only 25 points more, and they have triple the wounds and -1 to hit. I get it. Okay, she can revive. That's pretty useful. The invul save is pretty good, but Junith has the invul save, and Junith has plus reroll 1s to hit and wound, and she's like 60 points cheaper. She's a really good distraction card effects, but then people are like, oh, wait a minute. She's like not that scary. And then they just ignore her. She should either auto-revive, maybe auto-revive with D3 +3 wounds, or, you know, use Miracle Dice to give her the wounds back, or she needs a points drop because 170 is just too expensive. Battle Sisters, entirely fine. Wouldn't mind weapon skill 3, but they're fine. Arco-Flagellants, I love them, keep them as they are. They'll be good in a horde meta, trust me. Celestians, I think they're gonna lose their bodyguard rule, but they're getting those badass halberd variants, so I think that's okay. They feel really fucking strong with their extra attacks and hit rolls and all that kind of stuff, but I don't think anyone has ever looked at the Celestians and been like, oh, those damn Celestians, they ruined my game. Crusaders, give them literally anything, they're super terrible. Death Cult, keep them as they are, maybe buff their damage or attacks a little bit. The Dialogus, +1 leadership is fine. Plus or -1 to the Miracle Dice is fine, but redundant with the Triumph. Spiritual Fortitude, which is a 5-up feel no pain against mortal wounds in the psychic phase, is only for herself. should be an aura instead. Would be a lot better if it was an aura. Maybe make her 5 points lower and then bake in that stratagem I mentioned earlier, because the Dialogus is just, nah. The Gemini Superior maybe shouldn't be characters because they get assassinate points like crazy. You're paying 36 points to give your opponent 6 points in assassinate. They can't be revived by Celestine if they're both killed. They need to have a unit of 2 to even be revived. They have low damage. They need some changes. Just like one of them is fine, but you already have Celestine and she's like tanky enough. Why does she need bodyguards? They should like work better together. They should have more synergy. The Hospitaller, fine as she is, I think maybe give her that relic idea I mentioned earlier, that little like Feel No Pain relic. The Imagifier, fucking great. Great unit. However, the Tale of the Faithful is bad. That's the one you never ever hear about. You have -1 AP ignoring, +1 strength, or re-roll your Deny the Witch tests. That one's obviously terrible. Shield of Faith needs to be changed. That one could be buffed in some way. I don't know which, but it needs to be changed. Preacher, it's fine as it is. Repentia Superior, not very good. Her melee output is very poor. Re-rolling charges for Repentia is mediocre because you just miracleize them anyway. And the reroll 1s to wound for Repentia isn't really useful either because now we have the Palatine. Honestly, she just didn't feel like she does enough for Repentia to make her worthwhile. If anything, remember when I mentioned before how I said that Bloody Rose needs to lose an attack, but Repentia should gain the attack to their profile? Perhaps instead they don't gain the attack, but she acts as like a little mini missionary and she gives them the +1 attack. So you have to take the tax for it. I feel a little bit weird about Repentia now. For a while when I was writing this, I said to myself, Repentia, total bullshit, need to be nerfed. And then I looked at Incubi. Incubi are the exact same cost as Repentia. They have an almost identical weapon. They have 3 attacks each, which is Repentia and Bloody Rose. They hit on 3s, which means they hit better. They have a 3-up armor save. On wound rolls of 6, they do double damage, and Drazar gives them +1 to wound. And they're like, oh, we got to the Drazar tax. The fucking Drazar tax is the Drazar refund. The guy is a monster. I think the problem is simply the same thing I mentioned earlier. Repentia can get into combat thanks to that Miracle Dice charge, whereas Incubi require like a Raider or something, and that costs points. So I'm a little bit weird about Repentia. My mind tells me nerf them, but my body is like, holy shit, look at Incubi. So if anything, I mentioned what I said before, Bloody Rose is the big issue. The charge rolls are also the big issue. Remove the attack from Bloody Rose, maybe give them to the Repentia. Or if anything, I wouldn't maybe mind nerfing the Repentia by 1 more point, making them 17 instead of 16, and they were originally 15. The one thing I have been noticing with Repentia is they're starting to kind of go down a little bit because of Death Guard, making their 2 damage weapons terrible. Mortarion, making them literally unable to reroll any of their crap. That's kind of just Mortarion though. And then like they're being kind of bad against Drukhari because Drukhari doesn't care about 2 damage because they're mainly just 1 health. I'm feeling them becoming a little bit less useful, unlike Zephyrim, which are very, very good now because they reroll all wounds and they're 1 damage power swords. Zephyrim, same deal as Repentia. You know, same deal. The attack changes, the Bloody Rose, that whole deal. Pretty much the exact same thing. I would like to move them to fast attack though. I don't know why they're in the elite slot. They're jetpack girls. Seems a little strange. Dominions, technically fine. They're a special weapon platform. Maybe it'd be nice if they had like a +1 or 2 inches to their base movement characteristic because they're supposed to be fast forward deployment sisters. Or give them forward deployment. Give them the usual like infiltration ability instead of just a pre-game move. Seraphim, mainly all about that Deadly Descent stratagem. Besides that, they're fine. That Deadly Descent thing with the scramblers and all, that's the problem. The Exorcist, we've seen the leaked data sheet already. They lost T8, they're T7 now. They've lost a wound. They've lost an AP on both of their weapons, but their small rockets do 2 damage now. It looks like they're gonna become like mortars. Some kind of ignore line of sight, which makes sense because they literally fire in the air. So once core is gone, they're probably gonna also have a huge issue. If they are ignore line of sight, that's fine. Maybe like nerf them, drop their points a little bit because they don't get core and rerolls. If they still have to look at the opponent, then they need a huge points drop. The Castigator tank is coming out. We'll see about that one later. Makes me curious about the Imperial Guard, who knows. Mortifiers, really fucking strong. Maybe remove one of their attacks when they have the double flails, so they have only 12, not 15. The Saws could maybe get a little bit stronger, maybe be damage 3. No one uses the Saws anyway. Honestly, they're a really good unit, but I'm scared to nerf them too much. It's that bring it down change that really made them strong. Penitent Engines, maybe I'm crazy, but I like these guys. Honestly, I think their price is solid. They're 50 points, and they're tankier than Mortifiers, just with less damage. Maybe give them a 3-up armor save. That's about it. Retributor Squads. I mentioned them already. They're bullshit. Revert the point change from 14 points back to 12. Add those points to Multi-Melta specifically. It's like the Inceptor problem. You wanted to nerf Plasma Inceptors, but instead you nerfed both. And the Assault Bolter Inceptors are crying in the corner. Honestly, Storm of Retribution is the big problem. Maybe limit them to only one Armornium Cherub and let them take an Incenser Cherub instead. The Rhino is fine, leave it as it is. The Immolator is too expensive for what it does, and it also only holds 6. It either needs to hold more, or needs to be cheaper for the weapon platform it provides. And lastly, there's the Battle Sanctum. That's a fortification problem. As far as I'm concerned, it's fine, but the fortification rules are just dumb. And that is all the units. This has been a long video. I know. It's been a very, very long video. It may seem like I called for a lot of buffs to this army, but truly, I think this is in a similar position to the AdMech thing. It's a well-written codex. It's better written than AdMech is, because all the orders are better than they seem, compared to like the AdMech Forge Worlds, for instance, but there still is a bit of a power spike. This army is like a heartbeat on like a graph, right? It's pretty decent, Bloody Rose, and then it's the rest. Bloody Rose is too strong. I'm fine with it being a dedicated melee order, but it needs to have power rebalancing. I want my melee units to be good in other orders, and I need some of these stratagems to be adjusted. Retributor squads and Multi-Meltas are just unfun. I don't like using them because they're boring, and I don't like having to fight them because they're annoying. We talk about the Miracle Dices for charges as well. That could be an active faith change, that'd be kind of nice. And a little bit more abilities to deny the witch and deal with psychers would never go amiss. Honestly, sisters are about weak units being buffed to a massive degree through tons and tons of extra abilities and powers, and also being heavily anti-psyker and making their own miracles. I love Miracle Dice as a mechanic. I hope it mostly remains unchanged. I think Sacred Rites and all that kind of stuff and Shield of Faith are all very cool. I think the army is flavorful. I think the army is fun, and at least they're very interactive. So at the end of the day, they can still be at least somewhat fun for the opponent, even if Miracle Dice can be kind of aggravating. I do wonder if they'll start to see a little bit of a decline with Drukhari out now, because one of the reasons they were so good is because they're the anti-meta profile. They carry anti-meta guns on non-meta profiles, so Plasma doesn't affect them. You know, you're going to go fight Death Guard, and then a whole bunch of sisters that are T3 1 wound just don't give a shit. Overall though, I love the Codex. I'm really excited to see what they're coming out with next with all the new models. I'm very hopeful, and considering how good 9th edition codexes have been, I'm pretty excited, especially with how good the Drukhari one was. So thank you all so much for watching. I'm sorry that I talked your ear off through all these different kinds of changes. Please go ahead and check out the other videos on DiceCheck, whether they be our tier lists, battle reports, or any of the other fun stuff we do. The Gauntlet's a pretty good one as well. Join our Discord in the description. There's a lot of stuff there and channels for all kinds of factions in case you'd like to talk a little bit more about it with some of your friends. And as for me, if I did okay, let me know. If my changes sound stupid and terrible, you can let me know. I'll be a little sad though. And yeah, thank you so much.
Hi, this is long-time listener, first-time caller Ickbard. Loving the content. So glad you got me into this hobby. As we speak, things are drying on the sprue. It's a lovely time, and a lot of it I have to owe to you. I look forward to seeing more of what bullshit you bring next time.